Hey everybody, this is Kevin at Fiveable, and welcome to the final Cram session for the year for AP Language. Welcome to less than 12 hours away, depending on where you are, from the test, or at least less than 24 hours away from test morning. So what I want to do tonight is answer every question you have. So this is the argument review session. However, anything that you're thinking, if you haven't hit all 3 sessions this week, come on, throw me every question that you can think of. Whatever's on your mind, let's talk about tonight. So what I want to do actually first, because this is the Cram session, is take 1 minute to just go over the criteria of your exam tomorrow, and then start answering any questions you have. We'll spend most of the time tonight on argument review, but again, any questions that you're still thinking of, please feel free to ask. So again, tomorrow, the first thing you'll do once the test begins is 1 hour of multiple choice. So that is college level reading passages that are analytical and comprehension based questions. So the text is super difficult. What I always say is the text College Board is choosing intentionally uninteresting texts. They want to say, what can you do as a reader on something that you're probably not interested in and that you probably don't have a lot of background knowledge in? That's just kind of what they're going for. So what I want to note with multiple choice tonight is twofold. First, prioritize the reading. These, unlike the ACT, SAT, which are college readiness tests, again, this is an AP college level test. So you have to focus on a high level reading comprehension in order to answer most of these questions. It's not like on the SAT or ACT where sometimes you can get away with like looking at a question and then just like looking for the answer in the text. You have to read holistically. So spend the time up front reading and understanding each passage, and then the questions will more likely than not fall in line. And the second thing about multiple choice is you will have 4 passages in 60 minutes. So on average, that's 15 minutes a passage. What I want you to do is view each passage as a standalone test. Timing matters here, and there's going to be a lot of students tomorrow across the world who do not finish this exam, especially the multiple choice part. So what I want you to do is make sure you finish. Make sure you see every question, even if you have to guess quickly on number 7 very early on, because you don't have time to like take 3 minutes on that question. Take your best guess, move on, and then at least you'll get to see every question. The last thing I'll say about multiple choice, unless there's more questions, is this. Don't keep your eye on the clock. Don't get lost in a passage. Don't get lost in a question. So timing is absolutely the #1 test taking skill that impacts your score on multiple choice, other than obviously the skill of your reading ability. All right, let's talk about the essays and then let's get to questions. So you'll have a little break after the multiple choice 1 hour test. After that, you will have 2 hours and 15 minutes to answer the questions. I'm sorry, to answer the 3 essays. So you're going to write, probably in this order, synthesis first, analysis second, argument third. So what I want to emphasize here tonight is 2 things about this holistically. One is maximize your minutes. So we talked in the last 2 live sessions. You can go back and check out, kind of skip around to the question and answer parts if you're a Fiveable Plus member, which you are if you're here tonight. The last 2 live sessions, if you want a deeper dive in analysis or synthesis. But maximize your minutes, know your game plan going in, and execute your game plan. So that will be, I know how many minutes I'm going to spend per essay. I know how many body paragraphs I'm intending to write per essay. Once you do that, it's all about just executing. So the normal time route is this: 15 minutes of reading time for synthesis source materials. Invest in that reading time. I always use that word invest because that's exactly what you're doing. You are investing the time up front, just like you are with a multiple choice passage. You're investing the time in the reading of the passage, and therefore you're just executing with the multiple choice. Where with synthesis, you're investing a high level reading of the sources for 15 minutes, and then you just quickly are writing as much quality as you can. For analysis, it's the same thing. So that was last night's Cram session. Read the prompt well, and again, go back and look at last night's if you want a deeper dive of analysis. For a lot of students, that's their hardest essay. Once you've read the prompt well and talked about the things that we talked about last night, which are author's purpose, overall writing strategy, etc., then go, go, go. Write as much quality as you can. And then argument's a little bit different. That's what we'll talk about mostly tonight. But again, I'll take all questions. Argument is this. Read the prompt, read it well, and then think for a few minutes. And I know that you're 2 minutes of like not writing seems like a ton of time tomorrow. So you want to maximize your minutes. But again, you're investing a couple minutes of thought so the writing actually goes quicker. For all 3 essays, I highly recommend this. Don't jump into writing until you know exactly where you're going with your essay. So if you're writing 2 body paragraphs, because we talked at length the last 2 nights, you're writing long, developed body paragraphs. You might not have time for 3, and 2 awesome body paragraphs for any of these essays is better than 3 decent ones. So again, 3 great ones is ideal, right? But 3 great ones doesn't happen often. 2 great ones is more doable just because of the time constraints that are upon us on tomorrow's exam. So for all 3 essays, don't start writing until you know, here's my topic sentence, and here's the evidence I'm going to use for support. Now, the evidence is going to be one of 3 things depending on the essay. Synthesis evidence will be driven from a source. And let me be very clear on that. It's not summarizing a source. It's just saying, I'm going to pull an idea from a source, and then I'm going to be in charge of the thinking on it. I'm going to be in charge of unpacking this topic. But I'm going to use some source material to get me going. For analysis, it's pretty similar. It's just a different type of writing. You're pulling something from the passage. In fact, you're pulling a piece of the writing strategy that you've identified. We talked at length yesterday about, in our rhetorical analysis cram session, about choosing the things worth talking about. So again, go back and check that out if you definitely want that review tonight, if you weren't with me last night. So choosing the overall, what I called last night, writing strategy, writing choice umbrellas, and then you're quoting pieces of that throughout. But again, the quotes are not what drive your score. It's what you say about the quotes. So don't start writing your analysis essay until you say, here's the overall writing strategy, and here's the quotes I'm going to talk about. And then when you're writing, you know where you're going, and you're just spending all your brain power at that point, not on thinking about what's next, but what else can I say? And again, with that, it's all about how would the audience respond? And then lastly, argument. Don't start writing your argument essay until you know, here's my 2 or 3 body paragraph claims, and here's the best concrete evidence that I can use to support those claims. The concrete evidence doesn't earn your score. What you say about the concrete evidence earns your score. All right, let's start to dive into some questions. Any questions you have, let's tackle tonight. All right, so first, and that's fine if we're doing all whole group questions, that's totally fine. So all questions, guys, put in the ask a question spot just so I make sure I get to them. Which, if any, essays are you allowed to use first person speech in? Okay, so good question. I highly recommend not using first person I pronouns in rhetorical analysis, because it's not about you, it's about the primary audience, which is often not us. So we talked last night about Ronald Reagan's Challenger address after the Challenger space shuttle exploded. That happened in 1986. You and I were not the primary audience, so it shouldn't be this is how Ronald Reagan wants me to feel. With that in mind, it does work in synthesis and even more so in argument. Now, don't do, and you all know this, I'm sure, don't do the cliche, I believe, or I think. Instead, do use I if you're literally talking about a personal experience that you had that ties into your own support. So an example of that would be, here's my claim, And let's say the claim is, let's make it super easy for tonight. Practice makes, let me word it differently. The more you practice, the better you are likely to be at a certain skill. So let's say that's my topic sentence. I can bring in my own experience. So I might say, okay, so I am a soccer player and I practice 3 nights a week. If it hadn't been, so that's my concrete evidence, right? And then I can keep going. My explanation, if it hadn't been for all that practice, yada, 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 explain, explain, explain. So that's when I can use first person. But again, I don't recommend saying I believe or I think. In your head, cross those words out and just say what you believe. That's just a stronger position from a writing stance. All right, our second question. How many examples should be included in the argument essay? Great question. What I'm going to do is launch into my PowerPoint slide and just kind of pop around them for to kind of reflect your questions. So what I want to do is pop over to my body paragraph and say, this is how it should look. So I'm not even going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to walk you through it. So first I have a topic sentence. We will read that. And then I have one example of concrete evidence. And then I spend all my time here unpacking my evidence. So you can kind of skim through it as I'm talking through this mindset. So here's my topic sentence. This is from an older AP prompt. Dissent is destroying society because it oversimplifies complex issues. So that's my claim. And then I continue saying, thus creating a culture void of critical thought. Again, that is my claim. I'm not bringing in my concrete evidence in my claim. However, the second sentence, I'm jumping into my concrete evidence. So let's just look at one more sentence, then you can kind of skim through the rest. This problem was exemplified. So I like that language to say, like, here is a very natural progression of thought. I am going from a claim to an illustration of that claim. I'm not acting like this is the only example. I'm articulating this is one good example that illustrates a larger point. So this problem was exemplified during the 2016 presidential election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. With all of that in mind, there's many ways to organize. This is my strong recommendation. After being an AP reader for the last 5 years and after teaching this class for even more, what I've found is this. Students who want to add more and more concrete evidence often don't have great explanations of evidence. And the explanations of evidence is where you earn your score. So I'm going to quickly, in 2 to 4 sentences in each body paragraph, cite and just in my, not cite like literally a source, but like just in my argument essay, detailing my concrete evidence in 2 to 4 sentences. And then the rest of the time, I'm unpacking the implications and I'm explaining how it proves my claim. So as you see this one tonight, I explain all the way to the 1%, about halfway through. This is just me stating the concrete evidence pretty thoroughly, right? But then here, voters to the end is where I'm really earning my score. A lot of times this is what happens. Claim, and this is like a mediocre essay, so in that 4 or 5 range. Claim, quick example of concrete evidence, 1 or 2 sentences of explanation, another example of concrete evidence, and a little bit more explanation. But what I want you to do is take more time with explanation. So I'm recommending free up yourself from saying, I need to get all this concrete evidence. Yes, you do want a blend of evidence. Yes, you want the best possible evidence you can think of. But what really earns your score is what comes next. So let's read a couple sentences of my high-level explanation to make sure you're seeing what you need to see. So you do this, and then you do as many cycles of this as you can within the time. So I recommend doing it based on claim and based on body paragraph count. So some of you will have 2 body paragraphs tomorrow. Some of you will have 3. But make sure for each body paragraph you have this much quality explanation. So I'll start reading at voters. Voters on both sides could not lower themselves to have civil discourse over their differences. Instead, name-calling and judgment won the day. If the American public could have found a way to simply disagree rather than dissent with one another, perhaps solutions could be found to our society's most important and complex problems. And then I keep going with that explanation. But I wanted to highlight that sentence. If blah, blah, blah hadn't happened, then this would be the alternative. I think for every body paragraph you write, that formulaic kind of sentence, and I don't mean like follow a formula strictly, but that type of sentence, if this had been the case, blah, 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 is a great way to extend a really thoughtful explanation. What I tell my students is you go into an alternate universe in your essay in which you compare our current reality to another universe where there's only one change, and you choose that one change very deliberately. So let's kind of back up to simplify that. Let's say I'm talking about my practice makes better topic sentence. So let me kind of take this away so we can just concentrate on the idea here. What I do with my students is, again, go into an alternate universe. And a lot of my students are really into like the Marvel universe, the Spider-Verse, that kind of thing. So they're like, okay, I got that. Alternate universes, are in movies. So I want you to have an alternate universe where there's only one difference. So let's talk about my practice topic sentence. And I'll show you what I mean by that, just on a basic level. So the topic sentence was, practice makes you better at a skill. My concrete evidence was, I practice soccer for 3 nights a week for 5 years. Therefore, I'm better at soccer. And obviously, you can do much better with like that to apply it to an AP level prompt, but stay with the logic here. So then I would say, because of that, I got better, I was able to score the game-winning goal last fall on our big game, whatever. And then I would say this. So this is like that if alternate universe statement. If I hadn't been practicing soccer so regularly for so many years, comma, I probably would not have been able to pull out that victory. So that's the only thing. It's a slightly different universe that you're talking about. Okay, I'm just using that because it's a little nerdy, like alternate universe comic lingo, right? But think about it that way. If it hadn't been for X, comma, this would be the alternative. You can do that in your explanations to make them super high quality. In order to get there, I'm freeing you up to say, you don't have to use a ton of evidence. You have to go really deep with the best evidence you can think of. Really good question to kick us off with the argument tonight. All right, we're kind of jumping around. I think that's just fine. We got to be ready for everything. So I'm just going in the order of your questions in general. Is it safe to write the essays that you can do best in so you can finish those in less time and then go on to the more difficult ones? Absolutely safe. Here's the caution I talked about last night. The time warnings that will be given to you, assume you are talking about, assume you are writing in the order and in the time recommendations. So your proctor will tell you tomorrow, it's been 15 minutes. You are now, something like this, you are now encouraged to begin writing essay 1. Now, a lot of you might be a minute or two into the writing, but again, don't rush that synthesis reading time. And then 40 minutes later, your proctor will say, another 40 minutes has passed, or you have 80 minutes left, or however they word that. But they'll give you a warning every 40 minutes at that point, so you can time yourself. If you have an alternate plan that works for you, go for it. So some of my students are going to try to take about 10 minutes, 12 minutes of synthesis reading time, and about 30 minutes of synthesis writing time to free them up, maybe 5 to even 10 more minutes on rhetorical analysis. Do what makes sense for you. If you haven't practiced with the mock exam recently, I do recommend, in general, stick to those guidelines. You don't want to, the biggest thing is this, you don't want to rush anything, but more importantly, you don't want to extend time to run out of time. So whatever happens, I'd rather have you be ahead of schedule than behind schedule. So definitely don't take more than 55 minutes on a synthesis essay. Definitely don't take more than 40 on an argument essay, unless that's your deliberate plan. All right, so good question. In other words, I'm freeing you up to do what you think is best, but you should know what's best based on your timing and hopefully a mock exam or two this year. All right, go to multiple choice. Do you have any tips for the multiple choice questions that involve referring back to lines in the text. Absolutely. So I tend to do worse on the questions that involve lines from the text. I'm going to tell you the truth. I expect more than half of the multiple choice questions to reference the line in the text. So let me just talk this through with y'all. First, like I said at the very beginning of the night, take your time to look at the text well. Read and annotate. Now, College Board will have 2 pages. One side will be the text, the other side will be questions. You'll flip the same exact text, a new set of questions. College Board is recommending or doing that to be helpful. They're trying to alleviate the annoying flipping back and forth. However, I recommend flip back and forth because you're going to flip back to your annotations. Here's my recommendation. Once you take about 7 minutes to annotate very effectively and understand the text very well, go to the questions and just plan on every question doing the following. So there are going to be some exceptions where you can just do it quicker, but you're going to take literally 30 to 40 seconds a question. I know that seems crazy. You can do it if you read the text well and if you're at your best. You're going to read the question. You're going to pause. You're going to go back to the text if the line is cited. You're going to look at your annotations just to remember, okay, this is what was happening in the text. You're going to read the sentence that it refers you back to word for word. That should take you like no more than 10 seconds. Then you're going to answer the question in your own words. And then you're going to flip back to A, B, C, D, E, and you're going to see which one of those choices best matches up with the answer in my head. Because more often than not, once you've understood the passage, you're going to be able to verbally say the answer. So then once you have the answer formulated in your head, it's a little matching game, which one best aligns. And one more thing on multiple choice while we're on it. Most of the time, there will be 2 or even 3 wrong answers that are partially or almost all the way correct. So you have to think really critically using process of elimination for the sake of time. Every question, look at it skeptically. Say, okay, what is wrong with A? If you can't think of anything wrong with A, say, okay, I'm going to check B, C, D, E. I want you to think critically. Be skeptical. What's wrong with A? Once you figure out what's wrong with it, cross it out. And when you're annotating, annotate simply for comprehension main idea. Because the higher level thoughts you can do once and only once you've read the text at a super high level. So annotate just in the margin, what is the, basically, I call it bullet point summary. So in a few words, capture the main idea of each section of text, which in general is going to be of every paragraph. So every paragraph, pause, jot down the main idea of what you've read. Don't take too long there. So we talk a lot about, and I've had a lot of questions this year on, but annotating takes me too long. I don't want the writing in the margin to be more than 5 seconds a paragraph. What I want it to be is you're reading, you're thinking very critically, and then you're just capturing your own critical comprehension thoughts in 5 seconds. Okay, good questions tonight. Again, any questions you want me to answer? I know the chat's active. I appreciate that. Anything, I'm just going to stay focused on the questions here. So any questions that you definitely want me to respond to, make sure you post it and ask a question. All right, so we've got a pretty long question here. Let's get started with the next one. So I know this isn't about argumentative essay, but I have a question on multiple choice. Totally fine. I've tried a couple strategies on the multiple choice, and none of them worked. I use your method as well as other ones. I usually get around 50% on the multiple choice. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. I can never get the questions done in the time. Do you have any tips to help me get more questions right? Okay. It's usually this. So I can't speak to you personally unless I actually see where you're going wrong, but it's still usually this. And again, I want to be super clear about this, everybody. Every single person who takes AP language, there's over 500,000 of us. 500,000 students tomorrow are going to be taking this exam. Every single one of us is at slightly different skill level of just reading quick, and comprehending quickly and nuancedly. So what I want to do is Just acknowledge that, but then say, no matter where you are starting, no matter what your skill level is, focus on the reading. So, you know what? If you're getting 50% every time, that's pretty dang close to college level reading. And I know that sounds crazy, but you got to get about, it depends on the year, 55 or so percent correct to track for a 3. And that's if you get 5s on all the essays. So again, 50%, I know you all like really want to do well, but that's actually not bad, right? So it's way different than most content-based or even the SAT-based tests or ACT. 50% is nearly college level. So I know tomorrow we want to get that 3, 4, or 5. Here's all I'll say. Still prioritize the reading. And then the other skill set is this. So really think about this tomorrow. This is the biggest thing probably for you. When you don't feel confident in a question, take your best guess and move on. If you are not finishing consistently, do yourself a favor. Know it's just a skill set that you've developed all year. Know what questions are not worth your time, because even after 3 minutes you're not going to get right, because that's just how some questions are, right? That frees up your time to say, okay, I'm giving myself a fighting chance on these later questions. That's my biggest piece of advice. Unfortunately, there's no easy answers. This is a super hard test to prepare for or to cram for. We're just kind of doing Q&A tonight, but it's not like any miracles are going to happen to inflate scores tomorrow, right? You want to represent your best day tomorrow. That's by getting a good night's sleep, as cliche as it is, and just mentally not stressing, but bringing your best. And again, those are all easier said than done. But again, don't put too much pressure on yourself. No, if I've been testing all year, I'm probably going to get in the 50% plus range tomorrow, but it's all personalized. If timing is a big factor for you, that's how you save the time. Say, okay, question number 7. I don't like you. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. B, move on. So I'd rather have you guess on 7 of the hardest questions throughout the exam than the last 7, just because they're the last 7. All right, quick question here, I think, and then Jesse, if you have a follow-up, if I didn't answer this one thoroughly, just let me know. I'm assuming you're talking about argument, just because you didn't clarify if it was another one, and that's technically our primary focus tonight. So how do you properly address the prompt? Let's go to my thesis. So I'm going to flip over back to my slides. Maybe. There we go. And let me pull up my thesis. So the prompt, again, that I'm looking at for my slides tonight, and again, my plan is just to pop around them, but the prompt is dissent. Do you agree or disagree with the following? Dissent is a cancer, and disagreement's good. All right, so some of you have written on that prompt this year. So dissent is bad. Do you agree or disagree? I'm going to jump down to my thesis, and then let's kind of take a minute to talk about effective intros while we're on this topic. So go down to the last sentence with me. As Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. So I'm clearly addressing the prompt. Oh, hold on. I use it. That was for my body part. My bad, guys. The prompt here is last year's argument prompt. Sorry, I forgot I had a different intro prompt. So the prompt that I'm using here is, what's the value of exploring the unknown? So let me read that again with that proper framing. As Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. So the way I address the prompt here, I don't have to say as Lindbergh suggests. I can. It's not helpful. So what I had to do though is use these words, like use the buzzword. So exploring the unknown is, and then it's all my thoughts. So I address the prompt by literally pulling out a key word or two from the prompt and then answering my opinion directly. What do I believe? That's what it's all about. So instead of reading this, let's just go to the steps of the intro. And I just want to talk you through this very quickly on how to write an effective argument intro. What I want you to do, if you have the time, here, actually, let's back up. let's make sure we talk about this, and then we'll launch into the intro. Argument timing, this would be my plan to maximize my 40 minutes. So 6 minutes of like thinking time, making sure I'm talking about the right things and using the best evidence I can think of. 6 minutes is going to seem like a long time. It's going to feel like, oh, I'm wasting too much time here. I got to start. Take the time. Do not start writing until you know what you're going to say. 7 minutes to write your intro. So that's what we'll look at in a second. 22 minutes to write your body paragraphs. It depends how fast you can write, but quality over quantity. So 2 great body paragraphs is better than 3 decent ones. 3 minutes to write a quick conclusion. 2 minutes to proofread and revise. That's my plan. Again, go in with your plan. You can totally use this and modify it. Okay, now that we've said that, I've graded synthesis, argument. Creative openings are super effective if done well. I'd say the top 10% of students do this effectively. Most students have a very generic, pretty much unuseful or unhelpful opening. So let me talk about how to really shoot yourself up for success. And if you can't do that within the time, how to still be successful. So the best thing you can do is begin by discussing a topic that seems unrelated, but then you tie it in. Let's just jump back to my thesis. And then the step 2 would be bridge it clearly to the thesis. And then the non-negotiable is you must have a solid thesis statement. So here to talk about the unknown, I introduced it by randomly talking about the awkward middle school dance. So I have a few sentences just kind of illustrating or setting a scene saying, we all remember this universal experience of these awkward middle school dances. There's boys on one side, there's girls on the other side, and we're just like awkwardly whispering to each other in the corner with awkward glances across the room. So that's kind of how I'm setting the scene here. And then I have a buzzword here a couple of times throughout saying like, no one knows what's going to happen. So the unknown is upon us on this awkward middle school dance. It doesn't, it's awkward. It doesn't really feel right until a brave soul crosses the room and starts to dance, right? So that launches then into my bridge, into my thesis, to say, if it hadn't been for that brave soul who embraces the unknown, that night would be forever held in awkward middle school misery. So I'm launching it into the unknown. So it's kind of like a fun little illustration to prove my point. I'd say if you have an example, maybe even an example from literature, this is the spot for it. Maybe like an example that's not your best, but that you think you can make work. So this is not my best example of concrete evidence, right? Going back to the middle school dance. Who I'm going to talk about is Thomas Edison, Neil Armstrong, Gandhi, historical figures that have embraced the unknown. That's my better evidence. I'm saving that for the concrete evidence. I'm having like a more clever, unique intro here. So I'm talking about a creative opening. I'm intentionally using the language of the prompt to bridge to a thesis. And then no matter what, my thesis sounds like this. Exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary. Just very clearly stating what I believe. Now let's talk for a second about what to do if you can't pull this off in 7 minutes. Well, instead of doing this creative opening, do the more traditional route. So throughout time, I'm just going to kind of say like, this is essentially in 3 or 4 sentences what I would say. Throughout time, most of society has been uncomfortable when looking into the unknown. However, the greats among us, living and dead, have been willing to go where no man has gone before. Okay, a little Star Trek reference there. So few men and women are willing to embrace the unknown. However, those few men and women are who we're still talking about today. They are the ones who write history. So I'd have like just a few sentences like that are my own thoughts, not just paraphrasing the prompt, that lead me into my thesis. And then again, my thesis would sound exactly the same. Exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary. All right. Great questions tonight. We're moving right along. All right. What's your opinion on personal anecdotes? Let me start that again. What is your opinion on personal anecdotes in the argument essay? I listened to some opinions from past readers, and they say it makes your essay stand out. If it is good to include one, what's an example? Okay. Yeah, so I've been an AP reader, like I said, for 5 years, and what I would say is this: there's no hard and fast rule on personal anecdotes. I do push back on the idea that personal anecdotes um, make it stand out in a good way, because honestly, there's a lot of students who will use a personal anecdote tomorrow, and then you can totally do it, but that type of evidence doesn't automatically make it better because it's so common. Here's what I would say, and here's maybe the better push. So twofold. One, it's all about what you say with it. That's no surprise there, right? So you quickly discuss your concrete evidence, and your concrete evidence could be personal. And then it's all about explaining, like we talked about at length. So again, if it wasn't for my 3 years of soccer practice, yada, yada, yada. So that's a personal anecdote, right? But I only earn the score I earn because of what I say about it. And the second thing I'll say is this: don't allow yourself to only have an entire essay of personal anecdotes. So I would say limit one per customer. In other words, only have one personal anecdote throughout an argumentative essay. And you can slip it into synthesis, since we talked about synthesis 2 nights ago, but that can't be the primary support. You can weave a personal anecdote into a synthesis source if appropriate, if you actually have a connection. Don't force it. Always think about argument this way. So let's go back to argument. What are my claims? What are my beliefs? Then, what's the best evidence I have to support that claim? Sometimes it'll be a personal anecdote. Sometimes it'll be Gandhi, like I just mentioned. All right, next question. Keep them coming, guys. We'll be here until they're all answered. My teacher told us that if we want to score a 7 to 9 in the synthesis essay, we have to use almost all the sources. But you said 4 sources is okay. Is it possible to get a high score for you 4? Absolutely. So I graded synthesis at the AP reading last year. This was the trend that I saw. Now, this is anecdotal. I graded 1,000 or so essays. Obviously, there were 500,000 scored. But again, out of 1,000 essays, this was the trend that I saw, and this is what other readers that I talked to agreed with. And so this is how I've shifted my instruction the past 2 years. I used to think, kind of like your teacher, that I needed to do 7 to 9. I had to do like the majority of the sources. I now think this based on reading the synthesis prompt. You're not earning your score in citing sources. You have to cite sources, but you're earning your score in what you do with the sources. And if you try to cite 7 sources, you're not giving yourself much time to do much with them. So again, I read a 9 essay that used every source, but I also read a 9 essay that used 4 sources. So I think that's like very clear. Yes, the count is not why you earn your synthesis score. It's what you do. It's your argument, and you are the driving thinker. Now, the only caveat there is make sure you do cite at least 3 sources. I think the sweet spot is 4 because then you're doing a little bit more than the minimum. All right, next question. What are the best examples to use on the argument essay? And then Randy asked, like, is it history, literature, movies? Like I said, personal anecdotes work. I think in general, the best is going to be one of these 2, though. A historic example or a current event. So my model body paragraph was about concrete evidence of the 2016 presidential election. That's perfect. Maybe my next body paragraph would be about World War I, or something from history. I think the best thing you can do, I think this is the sweet spot, is have a contemporary example for your first body paragraph or second body paragraph, and the second, I want him to use a more modern example. So a contemporary example and a more historic example. A good blend there. All right. This is more about rhetorical analysis. Is it okay for us to write about our personal inference of what the author's greater purpose is, even though there isn't any evidence that directly supports my claim? Let me think about that for a second. So this is more about rhetorical analysis. Is it okay for us to write about our personal inference I would say just be careful. I would just encourage you to say this. Just try to get the primary purpose correct. So just say this is exactly what the primary purpose of the work is. Your inference should be more of like, what would the audience believe? In other words, save your inference time. I think it's just safer to say, here's definitely the primary purpose, and here's what the audience would likely believe. So I would say be cautious of you inferring the greater purpose, and just say like, what as a high level reader do you identify as the primary purpose? All right, quickly, because we talked about this a little bit. Best pace on multiple choice. Again, 15 minutes per passage. Half of that time, so 7 or 8 minutes, read at a high level, and then half of the time answer the questions as fast as possible. All right, best type of evidence to use. We just talked about that, so good question, obviously, because it's on a lot of people's mind. Personal anecdotes work. Historic evidence, current events, I think, are the best evidence to use. Okay, so question about analysis. For the analytical thesis statement, do you write the rhetorical devices and abstract ideas? We talked about this last night in the Cram session for analysis. Must-haves are purpose. Must-have is audience. And then just list the overall umbrellas that you've identified. So an overall umbrella might be the author works to unify herself with her audience. And that's the overall umbrella. So I would mention the 2 or 3 overall umbrellas, but don't feel like you need to list like everything that you see or that you'll talk about. All right, should I do a counterclaim in a separate paragraph or throughout my essay? Good question. I heard about integrating it throughout your whole essay, but I've been doing it in a separate paragraph this whole year. Here's what I'll say. We are like 24 hours away, give or take a few hours, depending on where you are. Don't reinvent the wheel on yourself tomorrow. If it's been working for you all year, don't just try to do something you've never done before tomorrow. That doesn't make sense. Make tomorrow the best day you can by doing the things that you've done all year to the best of your ability. With that in mind, you can do, for synthesis and argument, you can address the counter either method. So either in your body paragraph, like standalone, or at the end of each body paragraph. I think it's often a little bit higher level and a little bit more nuanced when you address quickly the counterclaim in every body paragraph, as opposed to like saying, here's my counter and then here's what I believe. I think that's a little bit more formulaic and sometimes a little bit less thoughtful, but you can pull it off very well. And if you've been doing it all year, just again, execute the best you've done tomorrow should be your goal. But for everyone who's like practice maybe both ways or neither way, think about just a sentence or two addressing the counter argument towards the end of your explanation. So let's go back to my soccer practice analogy. The claim was practicing makes you better at a skill. And then I talked about like my alternate universe. If I hadn't practiced soccer for multiple years, finish that thought, and then this would be how you address the counter argument. Some might argue that I could have gotten lucky and still scored that last game winning goal. However, and then you can kind of like counter it right away. However, I believe that the reason I scored that goal was because I practiced and got ready for that moment for years. So a quick little counter, and then the opposition, and then you addressing it in each paragraph, I think is done at a really high level. All right, can you talk about how to connect your prior knowledge of novels you've read throughout the year to your argument? Yes. So I know like across the world, some AP classes are very literature heavy and some barely touch literature. What I'll say is this: if your class was literature heavy, we don't know that. So think about this. We're not asking what you've done this year. We're asking what you know as a person. Basically, we view you as a global citizen. So you're a citizen of the world with ideas about the world. what are they? So with all that in mind, I'm just framing this statement. Don't force the novels. So we just talked about, and you can absolutely use them, but we just talked about the best evidence. And I said current events or historic evidence are often the best. And the third best, depending on how you do it, is probably personal anecdotes. Last would be fiction. So that's literature or that's movies. You can use them, but think about it this way. If I was to ask you, prove to me, or let me put it this way, how important is it to practice a skill? Me talking about soccer in my own experience is way more effective than saying, we talked about this last night. In Harry Potter practiced some wizardry skills, and therefore he won the battle at the end of the book. And I'm being facetious there, like that. I was intentionally not sounding very like clear or articulate there, but kind of making a point. You can absolutely use novels, but make sure that is absolutely the best evidence you can think of. So the only way I would use a novel is as a piece of concrete evidence. Think about it this way, though. Like I said in my intro, if you have more of a creative piece of evidence, it's best served in your intro if you have time to articulate it. Don't take more than 6-7 minutes on the intro. But if you can, you could say, in Harry Potter, he practiced wizardry for 7 years, defense of the dark arts, and blah, 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 blah. By the end, he defeated Voldemort. This fictional example illustrates a realistic trend that the more you practice, the better you'll be at a skill. And then you launch into your thesis. If you're going to use Harry Potter or whatever the novel is, Great Gatsby, whatever, only do it if it fits the prompt. And the best space for it is that creative opening. You can use it in concrete evidence, but I would prefer historic or current event. All right, got a question on synthesis. Is there any difference in what I should write depending on whether the essay asks me to take a position or ask for the most important considerations? Not really. Your thesis will be a little bit different because you just have to list the important factors, but really synthesis is generally going to be the same. So your thesis will be a little bit different. It'll sound like an argument thesis either way. It won't mention sources, but it's not going to really change the course of action for synthesis. So be ready for either type of question in terms of the wording, but the skill set is exactly the same. All right. Austin says, what should I eat mid-snack? I don't know. Get a granola bar, put it in your pocket. You can't go to your locker, I don't think, between the exams. So a little protein for you won't hurt. Nothing much. And don't drink too much because no bathroom breaks during the essays. No one's got time for that. All right. If I were to do 2 body paragraphs, would you recommend doing 2 claims or 1 claim and 1 counterclaim rebuttal? Yeah, I absolutely recommend 2 claims. And that's why I push a lot of students to not doing an entire body paragraph on the counter, but slipping the counter into the end of their explanation. For 1, I think it's actually often a higher level counter. And for 2, it's freeing you up to do 2 great body paragraphs as opposed to, like, again, a lot of students just don't have time to write 3 great body paragraphs. So by not dedicating an entire body paragraph to the counter, your following body paragraphs can be more substantial, but you always want at least 2 of your own claims. That's a really good question. All right, so we got a question on the argument essay. My teacher has suggested to include the 2 or 3 topics you will be discussing in your essay, in your topic sentence. I think you mean thesis there. Is this the best way to structure the intro, or is there a better way to go about this? Let's just quickly jump back to my thesis as we're talking this through. My thesis reads, as Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. Those are my ideas. Those are my claims. I have not mentioned Gandhi, Neil Armstrong, Thomas Edison. Very intentionally. I have plenty of time to talk about them. Right now, I want to focus on what do I believe. So in a nutshell, that it's not bad. if I mention them, but I actually think it's better if I don't. So I would push you all to say, save your evidence, not in your topic sentence or thesis. Make the topic sentence and thesis space about your ideas, your claims, and then the second sentence immediately jumps into the concrete evidence. Good question, Taylor. All right, if I cannot remember specific details about the example I want to use, such as the name or title, should I still use it? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the tension that a lot of students have, because you all have enough background knowledge. The skill set is breathe, take a deep breath, think about what you believe, what are your ideas, take another deep breath, think about, okay, out of all the things that are in my brain, what's the best thing I can think of? So if you don't have a lot of details about it, it's not the best thing. But if you're just missing one or two pieces of information, and it's like, if it's your claim perfectly, go ahead and use it. So you can say, let's say it's a current event. Let's say you're talking about the Me Too movement, and you don't remember like the name of the specific case that you want to talk about. You can absolutely still talk about the Me Too movement and the trend, and just give as much of the specifics as you can. So you might not be able to say it was this person who was accused of this, filling those name kind of details. But again, the more details you have, the better. Those little precise like facts are not as crucially important as like just what you're talking about. But great question. So that's always the tension. Just like, how much do I know about this, and how much can I like articulate how it proves my point? Okay, pros and cons of having 2 or 3 body paragraphs because of time. Yeah, let's just rehash that really quickly. I push you all to do what you can do. And hopefully, I literally did this today with my students. This is my last day with them before the exam. I literally went through, okay, rhetorical analysis. How many fingers? Hold up how many body paragraphs you're going to write, 2 or 3. They know what they're going to do. 75% of my students are writing 2 body paragraphs on every essay. 25% of my students or so are writing 3 on 1, 2, or 3 because they're just a little bit quicker writers. They're just like a little bit more thoughtful on their feet. In other words, like just organizing their thoughts on their feet, and then they can just literally write fast and write well. But again, so just think about what you know about yourself. And again, if you're not sure, 2 body paragraphs is the safer option because you're going to write for 2 hours straight either way, right? So it's not about length of the essays, it's about length of your explanation. So not all 3-page essays are created equally. A 3-page essay that's 60% evidence and 40% explanation is not as strong as a 3-page essay that's 40% evidence and 60% explanation. That's the mindset I want you to have. So by having less body paragraphs, you need less evidence. It opens you up to have more time for explanation. Thank you for the question. All right. So I did extremely well after practicing a long time for ACT reading. What's the best advice you have on transferring my skills on that test to the multiple choice? Yeah, so again, ACT, SAT is a college readiness test. So if you did really well in the ACT, you're ready for AP language, with one caveat. On AP, again, I said this earlier, you have to make sure you're spending the time reading the nuance of the text. ACT, SAT is just easier, right? Again, it's not easy. So if you did well on it, you should walk in confidently here. But knowing this is not college readiness, this is college level material. So just take your time through the reading of the passage. The skills do transfer over in terms of if once you've read the passage well and understand it with nuance, you can get it. So you have to be thinking, okay, what's the purpose? A lot of the questions are on the AP exam are more analytical purpose driven than on ACT, SAT. Those are more comprehension driven. Although there's inference in both, there's analysis on both. There's just a greater emphasis on purpose and writing choice throughout. But there's no way to practice for that within 24 hours. What you can do, though, is again, make sure you're not looking at the questions before you read. Read to read. Take your time to read and annotate, as we've talked about tonight. And then let me say this one more time. I want this to really sink in. So once you've read well, don't flip the page until you say, this is the primary purpose of the text. I know why this thing exists. Go to the questions. Read the question. When appropriate, most questions it's appropriate, flip back to the line, look at your annotations, reread the sentence that's cited, think about the answer in your own words, and then match the answer in your own words to the correct answer. That's how you're going to translate those skills. All right, for 1800, 1900 passages, so, centuries past, so old, difficult writing passages. How do you suggest trying to get to the main idea if the language is difficult to understand? Are there keywords or things to look for to help if we are struggling to understand what the author's saying? Absolutely, that's a great question. It's such the tension of our class. What I want you to do is this. So annotate from an idea and know when you're stuck. And keeping an eye on the clock, you're not going to get lost, but release yourself to reread a sentence or two when you're like, I really need to reread that again. So I want you to annotate. If you can't write in the margin, okay, I just don't know this text well enough yet. So don't plow through the text. It's a waste of time to read every word on the page if you're not comprehending it. What I want you to do instead is just be honest with yourself as fast as you can, but take your time in actual reading portion. So what I mean is no brain breaks, no oh, this is hard. What am I going to do? No freak out moments. There's going to be one super hard passage tomorrow. First, I recommend saving it for last. Second, so just find the oldest passage and save it for last. Second, if you've read a sentence or two or three times, move on. Ground yourselves, in the sentences that you do understand and just make the most meaning from it that you can. There will be some sentences you understand. And two, prioritize the rereading of the topic sentences of each paragraph. As a general rule, if you spend more time there, the rest will fall in line. So I absolutely want you to do your best on these, take the time to read them well, but again, focusing on the pieces you do understand, let that launch your meaning of it if you're having difficulty with the overall text. And two, spend your reread time the most in those topic sentences to just do the best you can with that thought. And yeah, someone said here, I really appreciate this comment. Always, always, always read the sentence before it just to frame yourself. They will often give you the topic as well as the year and audience. So they'll give you some very crucial information to guide your reading. Absolutely make sure you do that. All right, I'm hanging out as long as there's questions. We've almost been going on for an hour. This is it. We are getting super close. So let's do as many questions as come in. If you're feeling good, log off whenever you're ready, but I will be here to answer questions. All right, on the multiple choice, there's often words in the passage that I can't define. Yeah, this is a great question too. How could I best answer the questions asking me to explain the word meaning if I don't know them? Are there any words specifically you see recurring and would recommend knowing? That's a great question. I'm going to type this in the chat because I really want you to know this. Didactic is preachy. And what was the other one? Want or wanting equals lack. It's very likely one of those will be the correct answer on one of your exam questions. With all of that in mind, so want means lack in older passages. So with that in mind, that's the only two words that I make my students memorize because they just are so repetitive. College Board is intentionally going to give you words that they hope you've never heard of before, and it's impossible to teach every word, right? So with all of that in mind, reread the passage or the sentence that the question's in. Just substitute take the word out, substitute a word that you can think of, a synonym, that still makes sense with the flow of the text, with the meaning of the sentence, and then just use process of elimination. These are often questions you have to guess on. So you're going to use process of elimination. You're going to take out 1, 2, so you're going to take out A, B, and E, let's say. Then I have no idea. It's either C or D. Don't take any more time. you could stare at the page all day and not know if it's C or D. Take your best guess after, again, answer the question in your own words, and then just see which one matches up best with yours. Those are hard questions when you don't know like A, B, C, D, E, those answer choices, but you can't learn all the words in the English language. Do the best you can. You're not going to get 100% on this passage. Those might be the questions you have to guess on, and that's okay. But it's a great question, something really good to think about. All right, synthesis question. Would it be best if we use primary and secondary sources? I'm going to say it this way. Like, I'm not sure if you're asking, so you can throw another question at me if I don't answer this. I'm not sure if you're answering, like, if you're delineating between the type of sources that they provide, or if you're saying like primary source is what they provide, secondary sources is my background knowledge. I'll address both. But if you have a clarity question, Alberto, just throw another question at me. So first, you can use any source. As an AP reader, I graded synthesis last year. I never was like, oh, this guy used source E. Why did he use source E? What I was like, oh, he actually did something really interesting with source E, or oh, he didn't really have anything to say about source E. He just threw some words at me, right, from the source. So I would say this. Don't worry about the type of source, although I know that that's a factor to consider. But really what I want you to worry about is, what do you believe, and how can you integrate some source material to prove your point? So Alberto, let me know if that doesn't answer your question. The last thing I'll say is, again, you can use your own background knowledge as long as you weave it in with the source. So let's say this. Source A said blank. I have personal experience that shows this. And then you talk about like how your life proves or detracts from a source. Yes, length plays length plays a role in the score. So I say quality first and then quantity. So you're going to write for 2 hours tomorrow straight. Your hand's going to be numb. You just write as much as you can. But I literally had a student a few years ago who wrote the longest essays ever, and they were 2s every time because he rambled and he did not like really even answer the prompt very often. So it's not like we don't be like, oh, this is 6 pages, 9, and you all know that. But absolutely, like it's hard, and you've all seen probably throughout the year like a 2-page 9 essay that's just like doing all the things great. But in general, quality first, and then the more quality you have, the higher your score is going to be. All right, in the synthesis essay, if we want to use a visual source, how do we reference it? Yeah, great question. Since you mentioned, I'm glad you did. Caution yourself away from the visual source, because here's what my trend is that I've seen. This is like what the joke of the AP reading was last year. Last year, if you've all seen, was the eminent domain prompt, and the visual source was the 3 little pigs having a piece of paper that said they were kicked out of their property because of eminent domain. A Walmart was coming in to better the community. And there were just a lot of students who basically said, source C, whatever the source was, shows 3 little pigs who are reading an eviction notice, or whatever they said about it. But they didn't say anything themselves. So don't just cite a visual source to cite a visual source. Cite a visual source if you actually have something to say about it. So that's obviously the first caution, and it's a big caution. And then it doesn't matter how you cite it. For every synthesis essay source citation, it can either be, and literally we don't care, it can either be source C or the author's last name, whatever's in that parentheses on that prompt page. So don't super stress out about which one you're choosing. Stress out about what you're doing with the sources. And let me be clear here. It's not which one you're choosing, it's which method of citing you're choosing. That's what I'm talking about. All right, lots of good questions tonight. I'm going to hang out for like 1 minute as we're wrapping up to see if any other questions pop in. So last chance if there's any questions. So again, here's my push for all 3 essays. Breathe, take your time. You've got this. You're ready for the exam. I have full confidence. If you are taking time out of your day throughout the course of the year to come on Fiveable, you care enough that you've been working hard all year, you're going to get a qualifying score of a 3, 4, or 5. Nothing to stress out about. It's going to be a good day. It's a day of celebration for you. Focus, breathe, and execute. All right, we got a bunch more questions popping in. Okay, follow-up question. Thanks for anytime I'm not quite getting to what you're meaning, throw it at me. So, for the visual source, should we describe it to show they're referring to that source? Again, if this doesn't answer your question, throw it at me again. Stick with me. But here's what I'm thinking. You don't need to say we know the sources in and out. So you don't need to do a lot of work explaining to us what the source is. We know that. Integrate the source into your own argument. That's what you can do best. So don't feel like you need to say, let's use the eminent domain, Three Little Pigs again. This is a cartoon of blah, 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 blah. 3 little pigs are doing blah, 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 blah. Instead, just say, the political cartoon with the 3 little pigs represents, and then go off of your own explanation. So it might say, represents how oftentimes people don't even know what eminent domain is before it happens to them. And then, again, you have to have a lot more to say there. So don't, and hopefully this is getting at it, but again, if not, throw it back at me. Don't worry about going out of your way to painstakingly explain the source to us. We know the source. You just got to talk about it. All right, how should we introduce a piece of personal evidence, like a good transition phrase to use? Yeah, great question. For any evidence, but especially personal evidence, just contextualize it. So say, a perfect example of this phenomenon is, just phrases like that. So for personal evidence, you would say, I experienced this myself a few years ago. Like that's a good, quick 5-second transition sentence, and then you launch into what actually happened to you. All right. What are some things graders hate seeing? Phrases, cliches we should avoid adding in our essays. Here's the biggest thing, y'all. We hate you simply copying down or barely paraphrasing the prompt page. We have to read that prompt page every day before we start reading. We basically have it memorized, and that's for whatever source, right? You're going to have 3 readers this year. You'll have 1 for each essay. So a lot of you know this. I will go this June, and I will grade 1 of the 3 essays, and that's what everyone's experience is. So I only have to worry about synthesis. That's what it was last year. So I've internalized and basically memorized the sources and the prompt page. You are not showing me any thinking by just citing or just like paraphrasing, I should say, the background knowledge that the sources prompt pages provide you. I shouldn't have said source, that the prompt page provides you. So that's holistic across the prompts, and that's probably the #1 error students make, because they know they should say something in their intro, but they just ended up like using College Board's ideas or words. I want to hear your words. I've already read College Board words a million times. Good question. All right. Should I do anything right before multiple choice because I get stressed out right before? Okay. Yeah, 2-questioner. You have to use a #2 pencil on multiple choice, and I believe you can write it in a blue or black pen for for essays. Use your preference. Use your favorite pen that has a lot of ink that's not going to dry up on you because you're going to write a lot. Don't stress about the color as long as it's one of those 2. Right before multiple choice, here's my biggest advice. Breathe. I know it's a stressful day. I know that every minute counts. Just breathe. Think about what you've done this year. You've been on Fiveable. You've been working your butt off in class. You are ready for this test. Just keep an eye on the clock as you go. So just breathe and say, okay, this is what I want you thinking about. 15 minutes per passage. I've got to keep an eye on the clock, but I've got this. All right. When they ask you to refer to certain lines of text, would you recommend reading the surrounding sentences for further context, or solely the lines you are told? It does a little bit depend on the question, but that's why I say to save you time, you're going to annotate every paragraph. Flip back. Look at your annotations first. Say, oh yeah, that's what this whole paragraph was about. And then go and read that sentence. So you are looking at the context, but you're doing a lot quicker because you're looking at like the 6 words you wrote in the margin. again, it depends on the question a little bit. Sometimes you'll have to read the sentence before, the sentence after. You'll be able to tell that based on the question. Sometimes the question says like, what does this word in line 10 refer back to? You have to look for it in context. But in general, save yourself time. Like, look at the sentence before and after. But depending on the length of the sentences, you can just look at your annotation sometimes and just be just as fine. All right. Would you consider it okay to use I in the synthesis and argument essays? Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. Not I think, I believe, but if you're talking about a personal anecdote, don't avoid the word I. There's nothing wrong with the word I. So yeah, don't say I believe or I think. It's just a sign of a weaker writer because we know it's you who's doing the thinking and the writing. That's what we want. But you can use personal anecdotes for sure. All right. Do you know how much break is in between the multiple choice and the essay section? From memory, it's 10 minutes. I could be off by a couple minutes there, but I'm pretty sure it's 10. So just plan on that. Again, brain break and breathe. What I want you to do after the multiple choice, don't be overconfident. Don't be underconfident. Say, okay, what's done is done. I did my best. Now I've got to get ready for some essays. All right, one more question. All right, sometimes there are questions that ask, what is the purpose of the paragraph in the whole passage? Some of the paragraphs are extremely long and can waste a lot of time rereading. That is absolutely why you're exactly right. You kind of led me there in the question. Annotate. Now, if the annotations still don't get you there, if you don't remember it, skim back through. And that's why I said the other annotation is underline the key phrases throughout. So just go back to your annotations and the key words or sentences that you underlined. You don't have time. You're absolutely right to read an entire paragraph twice. Okay, looks like that's all the questions. You guys are ready. So again, good luck tomorrow. This is all the studying I want you to do tonight. I don't recommend doing anything else. You've put in enough time. Now it's about go do something fun, whatever that is for you. Watch a TV show, eat dinner, whatever you need to do tonight to make sure you are just mentally relaxed, sleep well, eat breakfast. All right, Lily, no problem. We got another question. That's why I was kind of any more that come in we'll do. But again, you guys are ready. All right, so for so many questions, I'm sorry, let me read the right one. Okay, I remember that some practice multiple choice asks for the definition of words. Do you think that will be the case for tomorrow? Okay, yeah, that's a good question. That is not going to happen as frequently. It still certainly could happen, but it's not something to super stress out about. Someone asked a question earlier about, like, what if I just don't know the words? Use process of elimination, take your best stab at it. Don't stress out about that. Stress out about, you're not going to get every question right. Those might be a few that you don't get right if they're on there. The trend is trending that's not going to be as frequently tested. So I'm only talking about trends. I don't have any insider knowledge. But I would say you might get a handful of vocab questions, no more, I bet, than one per passage. So that's like 4. But again, we'll see what happens. What I do want you to focus on is a high-level reading of the text. The questions in general are going to fall in line because they'll be more holistic, analytical. Okay. It looks like that's it, everybody. All right, good luck tomorrow, and have a great